Hello, we are
What's
live.
going on?
So I always like to start and just have people comment in the box as we start introducing you, Trevor, just where they're coming from and how they heard about us. I have my water. I wish I had wine over here. Please. Well, enjoy that red wine for me as I drink water. But if you guys listening, chat in the box and just tell us where you're from, how you heard about us, if you're new to Stat Wellness. And then also let us know if you have any questions that you want to learn tonight about the Enneagram. We've got a full agenda of things we're going to talk about, but feel free to put in the chat box questions you have at any time. So Trevor is our guest tonight, and I'm so excited. Trevor Woodward, I've gotten to know him a lot over the last year because he's one of our trainers at Stat Wellness. He's also a life coach. He does executive coaching, and he recently did a course on the Enneagram to get a deeper dive into how the Enneagram can be used individually, but also at the corporate level. Yay, we got Renee from Woodstock.
Yo. Come on, Lauren.
Guys. So I want Trevor to first, he's got a kind of unique background of what got him into doing what he's doing now. So I wanted Trevor to introduce himself and kind of tell us a little bit about you first.
Yep, that's right. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so obviously work at Stat as a trainer. I guess you could call it moonlighting since it's early mornings. But yeah, you're right. In addition to that, I previously did a bit of life coaching, which kind of informed my new kind of take on life in executive coaching. So I work for a firm called Mitchell & McClure Group, work with clients as well as just support the broader team. And actually a big part of that leans on a lot of developmental tools that kind of help build self-awareness and self-understanding. And the Enneagram is one that I really love. So it's been one that I've gravitated towards. I'm a little bit of a personality test junkie. And love the Enneagram. So it's been a big, and I'm sure we'll get into this throughout our conversation today, but it's really been a big part of my own just personal growth journey. And so it's fun getting to turn that back around and help other people view themselves through that lens.
And Trevor, you weren't always a life coach and executive coach and trainer. So tell us what got you into that? Because you kind of made I never know if it's 180 or 360, but made some major lifestyle changes.
Man, I think it was probably a 180 back to myself. So I went to UGA and studied accounting, which might be the exact opposite in a lot of ways. I don't always, but in a lot of ways from what I'm doing now. Did my MAC there, which is my master's program, and was headed towards CPA, and just it was just not my thing. And so actually the Enneagram was a big part of this. So the more I started to get to know myself, how I was wired, what motivated me, even some of the value that I present to the world, I realized, man, accounting is the right move for a lot of people, and it just was not the right move for me. And so I knew that I had a deep drive to help people. And I knew that I loved fitness and also loved coaching, working people through challenges in their life. And so I went full on to test both of those ideas. I had been working for a consulting firm for about a year and left it cold turkey and started my own business. First off, doing health coaching and life coaching. And then I met you, found you, probably a retargeting ad or something like that. And we got connected and got plugged into Stat pretty quickly. So that's kind of the genesis. And then it's just been a series of pivots. But the one thing that's been constant since then is actually Stat.
And you actually started working after school, didn't you? At PwC, was that where you were at?
So it was EY.
EY.
Yep. And then I went to a consulting firm, Insight Sourcing Group. I'm actually repping, I don't know if you can see it, I'm repping one of their vests right now. Great company, just was not for me.
So when you left kind of the corporate world and went into life and health coaching, or kind of life executive coaching, did you get any negative feedback from family or friends or significant others? That's a big change.
Yeah.
You did?
Oh, 100%.
Did you doubt yourself through the way, or you were just I know this is what I want to do?
I knew it was what I wanted to do, but I definitely had my own. I mean, look, anytime you take some sort of risk, and for me, everyone has a different risk appetite. And I think there's a lot of people that would look at this and say, I would never make that kind of move. There's other people that would look at this and think that what's the risk in that? So you can kind of view risk through a lot of different lenses, but to me, it felt really risky. I was stepping from, a career that from day one, they walked us through our role, and then they showed us like the promotion timeline. It was like, if you're here this 2 years, you'll get promoted and this is what you'll make. And then 3 years after that, you'll get promoted to this role. And then that's what you'll make, all the way up to partner. Right. And so it was like, okay, I could have my whole life planned for me, which in the ancient wirings of my brain, I was like, I really like that. It limits a lot of uncertainty. But I just knew that actually the risk for me was living a life that was unfulfilling. And I did not want to die, right? I'm only in my 20s, but I did not want to die with this sense of, yeah, but I had more to give and I never figured that out. So to me, that was what I always came back to. I definitely faced some criticism. People that knew me super well actually really thought that this was a great direction for me and supported me 100%. I did have some family members, though, that were, I think, just in their own fear, were really afraid that I was going to mess my life up.
I love that. And I know you mentioned a couple times that the Enneagram kind of helped you navigate that and better understanding yourself. So I know Eleanor commented that she recently learned about the Enneagram. For those that have not, tell us about what the Enneagram is.
Yes. So this is probably, as I was thinking about this today, this is actually one of the more difficult questions that I think you're going to ask me today. And the thing is the Enneagram is so dynamic, and it actually goes like, it's almost like playing 4D chess. There's so many different layers to it, but at its base level, it is essentially 9 archetypes of how people think, feel, and act. Basically how they present themselves to the world. So at base level, it's like 9 personalities. It does get into traits and behaviors, but actually the real juice is it actually goes deeper, and which is why I like it, is it gets to the core drivers and motivations. Like, why do you do what you do? Some of the other tools that we use and respect and love in coaching, like Myers-Briggs or the DISC, they address more behavioral aspects, but 2 people can have the same behaviors, but be doing it for completely different reasons. So the Enneagram is unique in that it actually attempts to get underneath the surface. And then really from those 9 types, you can actually even kind of break it down even further. Each type will have a subtype or 3 different subtypes. So instead of 9, there's 21 options. You can go into wings, you can go into lines, centers of expression. It's a lot of mumbo jumbo that you don't need to know. All you need to know right now is that there are nine core types.
And the thing I love about it, and a lot of people have told me this, is a lot of personality types kind of put you in a box and like,
Yes.
Here's what you are. And with the Enneagram, like you said, it's so dynamic. You can have aspects of all of them in you. It's what is your dominant type, or is that correct? Like that we have a little bit of all 9 in us, but we tend to be more dominant in one, or would you describe it in a different way?
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, and it makes no attempt to put you in a box. It actually shows you what box you're putting yourself in and how to get out of it. And I really like that language, because you're right, we do have all 9 types in us. And certainly the way life triggers us in one instance can actually bring up maybe like a something that we would score lower on an assessment. So we have all these personalities in us. We have the capacity for all these personalities, but you're right. There is 1 or even 2 that at the top we most closely align with.
And I heard from someone, they said, because the test that we did, and I think you did the Ready too, which we'll talk about a little later, where you can find testing, but I love that it gives you all 9. So you can see like, what are you least likely to, like what characteristics do you have the least in you? And so I always heard that you really want to figure out how can you get stronger in those areas. So we'll talk about like what we are, because I think it's really interesting, and I don't want to give it away, but we'll circle back to that a little bit later on, because I think there's so much you can learn from growing on the strengths of the things that you're the least likely to gravitate towards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with that, you're probably not going to change your wiring. And actually, I've listened to some therapists talk about this, and it's kind of an extreme circumstance, like something like really intense trauma that actually can change your personality and change it for good. But for most of us, we're not going to experience something that acute that's actually going to change our personality. So there is a core, there is a wiring. Your design lends itself to certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and so. My opinion is that you just want to work on your weaknesses so that they don't mess it up and really find how you can organize your life into a way where your strengths get to shine.
Well, and I know when I took the Enneagram, I did it right when Stat opened, and it was at the beginning. I had all this energy and I was the enthusiast, and everything made so much sense. And we'll be talking about the different types in this webinar. But then Trevor went through his whole weekend and he got this new testing tool, and he was like, Kristin, this is like a really deep dive into the Enneagram. And I was like, Trevor, I'm so scared to take it again. And my personality and my number has changed. And he was like, no, I don't think it has changed. Just do it. And sure enough, like I was still the enthusiast on a different test, but this test was able to identify that like my physical strain was high. And I just found it was so cool that even though my perception on so many things had changed, I still was the same number, and it was able to identify that it was just a period of high stress. Yeah. So I thought it was super cool.
And that's actually important to know too, is that you can mistype. Like assessments are not foolproof. So, I think the plan is later to give you guys a link or something like that, or some suggestions on where you can find some assessments. Definitely encourage you to take it, but they're not foolproof. I think the best way to do it is to kind of conduct your own assessment of yourself with the actual printable assessment you just took online. The biggest thing is, does it resonate with you? Like, you are going to be the expert on yourself most likely. You've spent the most time with yourself. Even if you don't understand yourself at all, like you have zero self-awareness, there's still no one who's spent more time with you than you. And so you're going to know at a gut level, like what resonates with you or not. So I'm a big advocate for sure. Take the assessment, get the results, but don't live and die by them. Like, actually do your own soul searching to figure out, where do you resonate?
I love that. So let's get into the 9 types. So they have numbers, names, and then Trevor, before we went live, was telling me that he's got some like 2-part names that help identify him a little bit better. So we're going to go through, and I just want to see if you guys want to comment in the chat box, just say yes or no if you've done the Enneagram and if you know your number. I'm just curious to see, or if this is completely new to everybody. Sometimes they're a bit delayed when they go to type. So we can start doing the numbers and then see if they jump in. Yeah,
that's great. So you can actually start at we don't have this up, but if you had the Enneagram circle in front of you, actually the peak of the circle is the 9. Patty knows her number. Patty, what's your number? Just real quick, send that over. I want to see what that is. But I'm actually going to start with 1. 2 wing 1, we've got 7 wing 6. This is great. Awesome. So my certification for the Enneagram came through the Integrative Enneagram. Patty is a 1. Thank you for that. And so there's actually 2 words to go with each name. And Chris, I'm actually not familiar as much with the Enneagram Institute's naming. So when I say the name, chime in with other common names. Like I remember you said reformer or helper, things of that nature. So for sure, chime in here. But so starting with 1. So the 1, the reformer.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So the integrative Enneagram calls them the strict perfectionist. And just at a high level, I'm going to give you the name. I'm going to tell you what their values are, what commonly drives them, give you a little bit of a window into what their self-talk looks like, and then the trap they can find themselves in. Usually, the reason I like to talk about the trap is because if it's you, you'll probably have like a really guttural, like a visceral response. So that's kind of actually a good litmus test to know which one you are. So 1, the strict perfectionist, they value principles and integrity, and they're driven to be good and right. So a lot of their self-talk looks like the world is imperfect and I must work towards improving it. I have to be good. I have to be right. I have to be perfect, and I can't make mistakes. So the trap for the 1, and even as I'm saying it, I'm like feeling the tightrope that a lot of these strict perfectionists walk, is that they can be critical of others, and they often are, but they're actually way more critical of themselves. And it's because they're deeply aware of how imperfect they are. They are deeply aware of the times they don't get it right, where they don't, like, they aren't perfect. But the value is they have like a high moral compass a lot of times. And if there is one way of doing things, they are great at knowing that way. So they're great at kind of sifting through a lot of the BS to find that one, that thin line of truth. So 2s. What's the other name for the 2? This is the considerate helper. The helper. Yeah. Yep. Compassionate helper. So compassionate helper, considerate helper, I've heard them both. 2s really value relationships. And a lot of the Enneagram numbers value relationships, but 2 value them extremely. And they're driven to be liked and appreciated. So a lot of their self-talk looks like, people depend on me for help. I have to earn the love and appreciation of others by being there for them. So they actually get their love and they receive a lot of their value and worth by being able to help others. And in fact, no one can help people as good as a 2 can. So the trap for the 2 is that if they're not careful, and if they're not consciously walking towards health, they can actually let a lot of bitterness sink in, because other people aren't able to help them as much as they're able to help other people. And they have trouble voicing that as well. But man, the value of the 2 is obvious. It's in the name. They're extremely considerate. They're super compassionate. And they truly do help people more than any other number on the Enneagram spectrum. The 3.
Almost all of our employees are helpers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because my certification was kind of it was a look at the Enneagram in business. The Enneagram's been used in a lot of like spiritual settings. And so this was cool because it was a fresh take on it. And they broke it down by industry, and I actually have to get those statistics and share them with you. But it was interesting that a lot of 2s are in healthcare, the healthcare space.
Yes.
Yeah. So the 3, the competitive achiever, what's another name for them? Achiever. Okay.
Yep.
These people value results. They want efficiency. They just want to get that W. They want to win at all costs. What they're motivated by is to win. So their self-talk looks like, man, the world values winners, so I got to succeed at all costs. I can't fail. I cannot fail. Now, the trap is that they actually don't know who they are if they lose. There's, like, in any competitive arena, there's only one winner, or there's a very small cluster of winners. You can even scale it to, like, if it's a team win, then there's someone who contributed more on the team that led to that win. And the 3 wants to be that person that's at the peak, that is the winner among the winners. And there's only one best, which sets them up a lot of times for internal failure, because they have this loss of self when they actually don't know. They don't know who they are when they lose. The value of the 3 in business, actually 3s, 7s, and 8s. We'll get to the 7 and 8 later, but 3, 7, and 8s are the 3 most common numbers in leadership positions at a business. If you're running a company, like, a 3 is a great person to have at the helm. Let's see, Welp just got a 3. Can we talk about the positives? Absolutely. And we're talking about them now. Like, you want a 3 on your team because there's a high likelihood you're going to win. That's it. They're super impressive. They're actually really inspiring. They can be insanely motivating because they often are achieving. They're at that, like, razor's edge of life. They're often pushing the boundaries of really in any industry, really any field. So yeah, and thank you. That's actually a great thing. I just want to reiterate again. I'm talking about the traps and the self-talk because it's the easiest way to know yourself by it. And if you are one of these numbers, you'll notice I'm actually sharing a lot of the value and I'm sharing some of the trap. But if you are that number, you're probably going to hear the traps or the downsides more than you'll hear the positive. So that's just further confirmation that you probably are a 3. Tons of positives on all these numbers. But yes, definitely want to make a concerted effort to talk about the positives. 4, the intense creative. Kristin, what's the other name you know them by?
The individualist.
The individualist. That's it. They value self-expression, individualism. And so they're really driven to express their uniqueness and authenticity. The best like vignette I have of this person is think about like the emotionally frustrated artist that like creates beautiful artwork, but they're like reclusive. They're off in the corner smoking a cigarette, probably like emotionally disturbed. I am a 4, so I'm not bashing on 4s, but that's the way 4s are typically portrayed in movies and in the literature and all that sort of stuff. The self-talk for the 4 is actually where a lot of their creativity comes from, is that something is missing and I have to go figure out what's missing in my life. Even beyond that, they have this sense that there's actually something missing from them, and their suspicion is that they're unfixable, that they're broken. And that's part of the trap, is that they can actually over-identify with their flaws and what is missing with their life, or what is missing in their life, and that they can actually miss their own value. But man, when the 4 figures it out, because 4s can be pretty emotional, they actually bring this equanimity to the world. They actually can like be very, they can actually delegate emotions. Like they can field a lot of incoming emotions, actually suss them out, figure out what's true and what's helpful. They can help other people understand how to put language around their emotions as well. And they just can have this like great presence. And once they get a hold of their value, they really know it is truth. All righty, so let's move on to the 5. The 5 is the quiet specialist. What do you know him by?
Leader.
What was that?
The investigator.
The investigator, that's it. Yeah, that's actually a really good vignette too, like a detective, like an investigator. They value knowledge and objectivity, and they're driven by the need to understand. I have a friend who is a 5, and he will often leave parties very early, and you'll ask him where he's going to go, and he'll just be like, I don't know, but I have a lot of thinking to do. And that's truly what he does. He goes and just buries his nose in books, how-to YouTube videos, and he just wants to know. He wants to understand. A lot of their self-talk, they have an interesting take on the world. They see the world as intrusive, and in response to that, they try to conserve a lot of their energy so that they can actually do that hard work of thinking. They try to be self-sufficient and not depend on others too much. They often find themselves internally saying, I must understand and make sense of the world. I don't need much, but I do need space. So 5s can actually be pretty introverted. The trap is that they over-identify with their hunger for knowledge that never actually gets quenched. And they can be experienced as reclusive and disconnected, which makes others experience them as stingy or arrogant with their thoughts. But they totally like mistype or misunderstand the 5 when they do that. The 5 actually just wants to understand. Part of the reason why they're quiet specialists is because the more you know something, the more you know what you don't know. And the 5s are more willing to admit that they're not an expert, even when they truly are. So a lot of the value for the 5 is that they probably know more than you. And it's a good thing they know more than you. So like if you want someone heading up a research facility, and you know, if you want to have an intelligent conversation with someone who truly like wants to understand, that's the 5. The 6 is the loyal skeptic. What's the other name?
The loyalist.
The loyalist. Yep. They value security and belonging, and they're driven to be safe and prepared. Their self-talk often looks like, And I actually think sixes get a little bit of a bad rap here, but the self-talk, a lot of it is the world is a threatening and unsafe place. So we have to be prepared and we have to be loyal because strength is found in numbers. Even if you think like evolutionarily, like if you were kicked out of the tribe, you probably didn't fare too well against silverback gorillas and tigers. Like you just died essentially. And so there's strength in numbers. So they're really driven to protect, and the loyalty is actually brought out of that. The trap for the six is that they can tend to worry a little bit more excessively and be experienced as anxious or doubting. And it's actually not, that's where they often get the bad rap, is people call them just anxious or a worry wart. And it's actually not that. It's that they see with clear eyes the risk that is there that we're all blind to. So the value for the six is they actually see the world for what it is most often. And damn, are they courageous when they actually take an actionable step forward in the face of risk, because they probably see 50% more risk than we do, which just makes them that much more courageous. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or are we going to save those for later?
I have a lot of thoughts on that because I'm 7 and Cameron's a 6. So I'll share some of those thoughts later. We'll get through these first.
Got it. Okay, 3 more to go. 7, the enthusiastic visionary. I believe the word was the enthusiast. That's the other one.
Yep.
Yes. Actually, I'm gonna say the self-talk and the trap, but I'd actually love for you to give your take on it, because that's you. You're gonna be more of an expert. Value optimism, opportunities, and they're driven to experience life to the fullest and avoid pain. So the self-talk is typically, the future is full of exciting possibilities and I have to experience it all. I'm okay. I deserve what I want. Just get me to whatever is next. And the trap is that they can get distracted by their search for fulfillment, and they can be overcome by FOMO and actually come off very distracted. But goodness, man, when they actually settle that drive and they actually direct themselves in one single path, the name says it all. They can be insanely enthusiastic, inspiring, and visionary leaders. What's your take on it, since this is you?
Right. And I think the biggest thing is that we see opportunity in everything. So where my husband's a 6, he sees risk in everything and I see opportunity in everything. It really kind of balances us out. Once I understood this from the Enneagram, which I used to think he was like popping my balloon every time I came home with a new idea. And I would get so frustrated. And I was like, do you have like one excited bone in your body? And I used those words so many times. And then I had him do the Enneagram, and his number 9 out of 9 is enthusiast. So he doesn't think the same way I do about situations. And it made so much sense. And I will also say that enthusiast, in my case, at least, hopefully this is true for most, but we're like a salesperson's best friend. We get really excited on ideas. I learned that I couldn't check people out because I wanted to give everybody discounts. I can't hire people because I want to hire everyone because I love everybody. Anybody can sell me on their ideas and their value. And so I went in to return a cable box one time because I don't watch TV. And I left with a bigger package because they got me excited about a hunting channel that I don't even watch. Yeah. But anyway, I think you nailed it.
Need that hunting channel, because maybe one day you will need it.
But what's interesting is that you mentioned the business leader, because my 3 top ones are 7, 8, 3. And you said those are the 3 like that you see in like business leadership or founders. And so I find that interesting. But
yeah, I think
we'll talk on 2 once we get through all of these. Lindsay wanted us to touch on 2 again. So we'll circle back after we get through the 9.
For sure. We'll go 8, 9, and then we'll end up and finish out with a recap of 2. So yeah, and just a quick riff on the 3, 7, and 8. If you think about what's valued, and this is not true across all businesses, but typically what is valued, especially in the market, if you're a public company, is winning. And if you want to win, then it's really good if you can see the future, which 7s can often do. And then once you want to win, you see the future, then you need essentially to make sure your company does it. You need, in a sense, a little bit of control, which is a good segue into the 8, because the 8 is the active controller. And they value control and challenge. They're driven to be strong and avoid showing vulnerability. 8s can come off pretty fierce. 8s can actually be a little bit, if you're on the opposite side of an 8, they can actually strike fear, which I think is just hilarious. The self-talk for the 8 is the world is tough and an unjust place, and only the strong survive. So I have to be a rock. I'm not allowed to be weak. And out of that is where they get the idea of control. I said a little bit of the trap is they come off domineering, aggressive, and larger than life. But there's actually a soft side to the 8. A lot of times 8s had to grow up early, and that's actually where they learned that the world is a tough and unjust place. So once you get underneath kind of the facade of the domineering and aggressive 8, it's actually someone who's extremely tender, someone who's extremely soft. If you, my best image of a really healthy 8 is like a Supreme Court justice who wants to serve underserved people. So a lot of 8s have this justice quality about them where they want to use their ferocity. They want to use their idea of control and challenge to fight for people that are vulnerable. So man, in a lot of ways, again, I think all these numbers get a bad rap when you just take them on behavior, because when you get down to the core motivations, and this is especially true for an 8, gosh, they can really fight for the people that can't fight for themselves. 9, the Adaptive Peacemaker. What's the other name for them?
Peacemaker. Yep.
Peacemaker. Yep. Value peace, stability, and they're just driven to be in harmony with the world. Man, and so again, if going back to the original view of the Enneagram, so the Enneagram is a circle, and at the top sits the 9. And I don't even know all this math off the top of my head, but there's a ton of interesting things that have to do with the geometry of the Enneagram. So if you're curious, you can go look all that up. But I mentioned that. I'll come back to it in a second. So the 9 sits at the top, and their self-talk is, I'm okay as long as the people around me are okay too. Can we just all get along? So it's interesting that the 9 sits at the top. It's almost like the shepherd of all the other 9 types. And that actually lies the trap, is they can actually be self-denying. So that in their challenge to make sure everyone else is okay, they forget that they have own needs. They forget that they have their own wants or desires. And they can actually kind of be a little bit of a chameleon. They can actually just take on other people's personalities to keep the peace. And so these people often will walk into any situation and they're pretty much liked everywhere they go because they just mirror whatever personality is needed in the moment. But man, they actually can forget who they are, what they want, and what they need, which causes conflict all on its own. And so the virtue of the 9, once they figure this out, is they have such a strong identity, like they're rooted in who they are, but they also really understand a lot of other people too, which is extremely powerful in a leadership position. So let's go back to the 2 as a little recap. The 2 is the compassionate helper. They value relationships definitely more than most Enneagram types, and they're driven to be liked and appreciated. So a lot of their self-talk looks like, I have to be liked. I'm driven to be liked. And out of that drive, they want to help other people. The trap, though, is that if they're not helping other people, then they don't really know who they are. That's actually, they give love in order to receive love. It's actually very transactional. And that's kind of the trap that the 2 can get caught in, is they can actually let bitterness set in and wonder, gosh, why don't other people serve me as much as I'm able to serve other people? And it's because no one can serve as great as a 2 can. But gosh, like the virtue of the 2 is that they truly do help people and have an insane capacity to help people. And actually, once they drive some self-awareness and get to work with the shadow side and cope with that bitterness that shows up, then it's just truly help unhindered. And that's a really virtuous thing.
And Trevor, can you go, so you do the test and you get like the top 3, and you're saying like really read about them, do self-reflection, and you may identify better with your second number rather than the first one that came back. And part of that just that, it's a tool, right? So we've got to self-identify. What does the wing mean when people say that they're like 7 wing 8 or 1 wing 2? What does the wing mean and how do you apply that?
That's right. So if you think about a bird with wings, the wings are on either side of the bird and you need 2 to fly. So once you kind of land on your core type, then the wings are just the numbers that surround you. So let's say for you, Kristin, you're a 7. You're surrounded by the 6 and the 8, which means, if you think about in the olden days, like you probably knew your neighbors more than you knew someone 50 miles away. The same idea holds true here, that the personality type of the 6 can influence how you show up as a 7, and the personality traits of the 8 can influence how you show up as a 7 as well. So you typically have a little bit better access to your wings. Now, oftentimes we have a lopsided wing. So we have one wing that's stronger than another. You said yours was 7 wing 8. Yeah. So, not a counselor, but I would imagine that part of the beauty of you being married to a 6 is that it forces you to get in touch with the 6 that resides in your own personality, which is actually a really great thing for you because it evens out those wings. So you want to have both wings somewhat equally strong so that you can fly. I know that's a really dumb analogy, but look, we want to be integrated. We want to have all these personality types in us and have some practice with them so that when the opportunity presents itself, we can actually show up in the way that makes the most sense instead of just getting stuck in the rut of our typical own personality or our wiring or our nature. Does that make sense?
It does. And they have different ones where like when you're stressed, you go to this personality type. When you're needing motivation, you go to this type of personality type. And I find that so interesting too. And kind of being like, you may find that friend that you always call is that personality type that you need when you're stressed, where like, I may not be the personality type for somebody to call because I'm going to be like, it's all going to be okay. You just need to put on your big girl pants. Like it's all going to work out. It's all going to be okay. I'm not as empathetic and, a shoulder to cry on. So I think that's really interesting too, as you learn more about it. And Eleanor was wondering the 9 and the 2, she's saying they both sound very similar. And I know they are similar. Is there a way that you can decipher between the 2 and 9 a little bit more to help people maybe identify the differences?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And there are actually a few numbers that often people kind of wrestle with, and 9 and 2 is definitely one of those pairs. Again, if you ever have trouble wondering which one you are or how to distinguish between the two, go back to the core motivation, which it sounds so easy in theory, but it can take years for people to really wrestle and get to know themselves enough to know truly what they're motivated by. But again, the 2s are motivated by being liked. Similar, but still different, is 9s are motivated by keeping peace. I'll give you some vignettes that show kind of the 9 in action and the 2 in action in their state of most unhealth. The reason I'm talking about unhealth in the way that I am is because the closer we move towards healthy, the less you're actually going to be able to figure out which type someone is. So that's an interesting thing. It's like when you work towards health, you actually move towards the center. You can come off in many different ways. But at our biggest state of unhealth, we actually just deeply burrow ourselves into our personality types, benefits and negatives, and all. So for the 2, imagine you have a 2, considerate helper, and I'm coming up with this on the fly. Let's say they have a parent who's sick, and they kind of orient their entire life around taking care of that person. Their schedule's oriented around it. Their finances are, where they live geographically, the jobs they take, the friends they have. Like everything is oriented around taking care of this person because that's where they get their sense of validation. That's where they actually get liked. Let's say that person gets better. So let's say like Kristin, you were a 2, you're taking care of your mom because she has cancer or something like that. And then she actually heals, recovers, and wants to go live a life of her own. And she doesn't need you to take care of her anymore. The mom, that's great. She just experienced like health coming back from something traumatic and wants to go live a full life. The 2, the unhealthy 2 that just took care of her mom is going to feel some sort of resentment, some sort of bitterness because, wait a second, I just did all this help and now you want to go have your own life? Like, what's that about? And then a part of that, they can actually have this loss of self. Like they actually don't know who they are because now they're not taking care of someone. So they'll often go find someone else to take care of. So again, that is a very unhealthy view of the 2, but I think that not perfectly, but it kind of gets to the gist of how a 2 might operate in that scenario. Let's say the 9. My boss is a 9. My boss at Mitchell & McClure, no one at Stat. And it's actually interesting because he's told me times where his entire family has been involved in a heated conversation. And he has a strong opinion, but because he doesn't want to rock the boat, he just lays back and doesn't say anything and tries to keep the peace. Now, again, the dark side of that is that can also build some resentment. That can also build some bitterness because he feels often like he's not heard, like he actually his opinion isn't valued. So they have these times where they get in touch with the anger that they repress. Because again, anger is the opposite of peace in a lot of ways. Anger causes havoc. They get in touch with that anger all of a moment and they explode all over the place. And as quickly as they explode, they try to reel everything back in. So that's kind of one thing that if you're on the fence of like 2 and 9, which one am I? 2s in their unhealth tend to go towards resentment and bitterness. 9s tend to explode in anger, and then they're often left confused about what that anger was all about.
And it seems like 9s really like peace. They aren't necessarily seeking internal love based on their actions, right?
That's right.
Like, so, a 9 could be in an environment and just be happy as can be, not feeling like they have to serve or help somebody there. As long as everybody's happy and everybody's taken care of, they're taken care of. Like they feel good. The 2 is to be like, I really want to help somebody because I want to get love. I want to help and serve to get love in return.
Mm-hmm.
So very similar. Both, all 9 I think are amazing personality types, but 2s and 9s are really easy to be around because they're helping you or they're keeping peace. What about jobs? I work in healthcare and want to be healthy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's actually a great thing too, is, that I want to mention is you can't use the Enneagram. Well, you actually can't, it's illegal. But I'll say you shouldn't use the Enneagram as like a hiring tool or a job fit tool, because we express our motivations in different behaviors. So like all Enneagram types have the capacity to be really successful in healthcare. 1 through 9 all have the capacity to be amazing leaders that lead companies from startup to high growth to stable. Every single one of these has a capacity to be great, motivating, compassionate parents. Every single one has the capacity to do all of these things and model the behaviors extremely well. It's just what motivates them might be different. So I'll give you a good example. Like I've always been on the fence on whether I'm a 3 or a 4, but I am a 4. So I'm driven to be unique and to be authentic. But part of the way I express my uniqueness is being an entrepreneur, and I want to crush it in business. Essentially, I put on that 3 hat as a vehicle to express my uniqueness. In healthcare, you don't have to be a 2 to be successful in healthcare. You could be a 3 and crush it in healthcare just because you want to win. And what does winning look like in healthcare? It often looks like helping people and being compassionate. You could be a 7 in healthcare. So
he said earlier she is a 2. So, which is, we were saying was great in healthcare. But I think one of the things to be mindful of is if you're serving others all day long, like how are you making sure to take care of yourself? Because I think that's a big thing in healthcare. All the number twos, like they just are serving and caring for others. And it can be harder to take care of yourself and understand what you need and to find love and fulfillment in things that you can give yourself.
Great catch. Yeah, boundaries. Boundaries are big for twos that are in like helper careers, for sure.
So how, I feel so tired sometimes. I know, you're taking care of everybody all the time. You got to figure out how to take care of you. And
yes,
I think that help with that is like setting aside times like, okay, I'm going to take Epsom salt baths 2 days per week. I'm going to Saturday morning spend the first hour just reading a positive book for me. Like, I think it's really good as a two, and really all of these personality types, to have a clear understanding of what fills you up and what are things that bring you happiness that don't rely on anybody else or helping anybody else or serving anybody else. And sometimes that's a hard exercise.
Yeah, Lindsay, one way to think about it that might be helpful is, how would you treat one of your patients? And then just do that to yourself. So it kind of gives you that level of objectivity. So it's a quick thought.
And Trevor, I was going to say, we're trying to start bringing in the Enneagram more with our patients, because it's so interesting. The more I learn about my patients and their number, the more I can see it reflected in blood work too. Like I can see people that are more, like the achievers, they have high cortisol and they have no idea. Their stress hormone is like through the roof because, they're always trying to be their best. And so we have to work more on the cortisol, where it's just fascinating to me, the connections of the cortisol and the thyroid, or, to the helper and different things where you can see hormonal changes based on personality types or what kind of plan they need. And you can change the treatment plan based on the personality types. Like some are going to want more detailed, some aren't. What helps fours feel most fulfilled? Trevor, that's a good one for you to answer.
Man. Yeah, fours have a really strong sense of purpose. Purpose means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So, and again, if fours are driven to be unique and express themselves, they're often creative. It doesn't mean they are artists necessarily, although fours make good artists, but you don't have to have even like a artistic bone in your body to be creative. It just means to have a creative way of viewing things. So I find when working with fours that they can be in the most, you could have a four that's actually really good in accounting or law, something where like you're not really going to change the rules by which you play the game by, but maybe you have some flexibility and freedom and opportunity to express your creativity and uniqueness in how you approach your day-to-day, maybe your schedule, maybe how you set up your work. So yeah, I would, even in some of the most rigid cookie cutter careers, I don't mean cookie cutter in like a simplistic way, but I mean like high boundary type careers, there's still room to design your life in a way to where you can be unique and have a creative approach. But for you, I'd actually flip that question back on you. What makes you more fulfilled? What gives you a sense of purpose? Like what would get you up in the morning? And it doesn't have to be as lofty as like someone like Elon Musk, who's like, well, I want everyone to live on Mars. It's like, okay, well, we can't all have that vision, right? It could be as simple as like, man, what really fires me up is when I can make someone else's day better. Like, lean into that. So I would say for you, on the creative side, figure out how to design your life in a way that allows you to express your uniqueness and how you approach your work. And then do some of the deep work of figuring out, and maybe you already know, but what feels most purposeful to you.
I love that. And where, do you have any links that you can share in the chat box for people that want to take a test?
Yes.
I know that my favorite one, it might be on your list too.
Let me grab one real quick. It's the Enneagram Institute.
Is that the $12 test?
.com. It is, yes.
That's my favorite.
That's it. So yeah, this is probably my favorite test, mainly because you can get honestly, you can get hosed on some of these like free BuzzFeed tests. Sometimes they're right, but a lot of times they're wrong. Because they're not validated. They're not set up by someone who is an expert. And so the people at the Enneagram Institute have really put a lot of care into setting up their assessment. And it's only $12. There are other assessments out there that like we'll use with executives that are upwards of $75 to $100, which are great, but they're unnecessary. So this is a great one. It's going to give you a lot to chew on for sure. So check that link out. I think it's like $12 or something like that.
And for anybody that's interested, Trevor agreed to start doing some 1 hour virtual calls with people. They're going to be $99, 1 hour to kind of go through your Enneagram results or your number, or maybe you don't know, and kind of help identify. And he can help you figure out some strengths, weaknesses, things you can do to kind of make yourself be better. And one of the things we were talking about before we got on was we're in a point right now in our life that nobody ever saw coming. And there's so many things in our life right now we have zero control over. And the one thing we can change is internally ourselves, our thought process. And it's such a great time to kind of refigure out and align with like, what do you value? What's important to you? What are your strengths? What are some things you can do to improve some of the areas you may not be as naturally strong in? So we're really excited to offer that. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with how you can book that. But you can also go onto our website, which is new. Hopefully you guys have seen it. If you haven't, check out our brand new website and you can book it on there, but we'll send out a link. And then I know this is a little off, but since we only have like 9 minutes left, one of the things Trevor and I were talking about is the fact that, right now is such a stressful period for a lot of people. We were talking about how alcohol sales are up, alcoholism is up, divorce rates are up, people are losing their job. It's a very stressful time for a lot of people. And we know that everybody in this, we've already seen people comment, is coming from all different personality types, all different Enneagrams. I know as a 7, I feel less stress. I feel like everything's going to be okay, where I know a lot of people in the room don't feel that way. And this is like the world is ending. So if there's a way to kind of give people that are listening, Trevor, some tips to kind of encourage a positive mindset in this craziness, is there anything that you can kind of leave us with some tips before our final question?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. We are in a little bit of a unique time. And the thing is, people respond very differently to stress, and even more so to crisis. So I would say, man, just off the cuff, give yourself and the people around you a lot of grace, like more grace than you even think you need to give them, because we're most people, especially folks our age, like have never been through something like this before, right? We've also just come out of a 12-year, the longest bull market we've ever seen in our history. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, the stock market doesn't work for us anymore. I mean, it can feel like the ground is being pulled out from underneath you. So people are going to respond very differently. Like you can even I'll imagine just for a second how differently each of these 9 types would respond, right? And then add on top of that, like how different, like 3 different 9s might respond to this, right? So it truly varies on a human to human level. So give each other a ton of grace. Yeah, but as Kristin was saying, I think it's a great opportunity to just explore your own personality and your friends' unique personalities as well. So one thing that's free that you could do is have honest conversations, totally free of judgment. Just exploratory conversations with people you love. Like, how do you feel about this? How do you think about this? What's going on in you internally? But for you personally, I would say, do something that gets you present and grounded. So, and actually love talking about this, like regardless of your core type, we all have 3 centers of intelligence. That's another way to call it brains. Science has actually kind of caught up to the Enneagram in some ways. We know now that we have obviously your head brain, but our heart and our gut are actually great vehicles of information that we can actually learn to rely on, that most of us are pretty disconnected with. And they all give us different information. And so there's a lot of wisdom to be found in the synergy of all 3 of these things. like I said, we're often overexpressed or underexpressed in others. So a way you can actually build up some intelligence and get in touch with your three brains is to be present and to ground yourself. So presence centers your thoughts and emotions so that you can face them and figure out what's true, what's untrue, what's helpful, and what's unhelpful. And then grounding yourself actually calms down your action, which is your gut, and helps you figure out what is the correct action. And something we talk a lot about at STAT is meditation. Actually, Sarah is phenomenal at this. I'm bad at meditation. It took me a while to even like it. I'm go all the time. So it doesn't have to be meditation, although that's a great outlet. Something like gardening or walking, or whiteboarding for internal processors, or deep conversations if you're an external processor. Something that gets you present and grounded, I think are two things that you need to be thinking about if you want to do some exploratory work.
I love that. And sometimes being grounded, one of the things is just like be barefoot. Like if you have somewhere to like stand outside or, get into nature, there's something so powerful in that right now in the noisy world to just like ground yourself. I love that. And then our last question, just because we have a lot more time on our hands, I think everybody does, is what's your favorite podcast, blog, or book that maybe people could listen to during this quarantine period?
Mm-hmm. There are a ton of good books out there, and I have not read them all. But my favorite was The Sacred Enneagram by Chris Heuertz, Heuertz. I thought it was a great book. It does have a little bit of a Christian twang. So if you're not inclined, there are some different takes on the Enneagram that are just as useful. The Integrative Enneagram's website actually has a ton of really great resources for you to check out. And that actually is a little bit more business and performance driven. The Typology podcast by Ian Cron. Love that. It's just conversations like this with people talking about their type. So it's super raw and it's really fun. Listen to this though. Go to the Sleeping at Last album. Sleeping at Last is an artist, and he just takes on interesting. Okay, M saying Atomic Habits. Yep, that's a great one. So Sleeping at Last is an artist, and basically made a bunch of songs. Or he embarked on this project and made songs for each type. So for the type 1, he I wouldn't even do it justice. Just go look him up. It will be well worth it. Once you listen to your song, it'll probably make you cry and then some. But yeah, those are the 3: Sacred Enneagram, Typology, and then the Sleeping at Last album.
So the Sleeping at Last album is each different Enneagram type, a song for it?
It is, yep. So there's a type 1 song, there's a 2 song, all the way through 9.
That is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Trevor, so much for coming on. If anybody wants to work with him one-on-one, please reach out. This is a special, be running at least for a little while during this quarantine period. And then we'll see if we'll be keeping it going. But a great way to have kind of one-on-one conversations about your Enneagram and get some real life tips specifically for you. Yes, Patty, it is recorded and you'll get a replay sent out as well. So you can re-listen to it again and again and again.
Thanks so much for having me, Kristin.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.